everybody knew where they were in 1963 when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. Uh, I was in London working at a Blue Angel club called the Blue Angel with Noel Harrison. And I remember a book at that time. It was an outrageous book. Outrageous, much more outrageous than our guy from England. But this guy wrote a book in 1963. I think it was City of the Knights. And Charles Costello, actor, author, wrote a book about this man's life. He was a male whore, actually a hustler, male hustler. That's a dangerous word in 1963.
It was an unheard of word in 1963, and hustler was one of the personas that he was. One of the things that make John Ritchie such a fascinating character is that he was so many people in one body.
Right.
The hustler persona was something that he needed to perfect in 1963 in order to get by in life. I mean,
right. You wrote this book with his permission. It's
Yes.
called The Outlaw.
That's right.
Of the lives and career of John
Ritchie.
John Ritchie, tell me about what is so fascinating about John Ritchie. Come on.
Well, I think that one of the things that make him so fascinating is that, number one, he was a hustler. But he didn't need to be, Skip. You know, I mean, he didn't need to be a hustler. This was a guy who was college educated.
Educated, right.
Who had been in the Army. He was 23 years old, and he came to New York City to continue his education at Columbia University.
Right.
And instead of continuing his education, he found Times Square and became a hustler on Times Square. I think that one of the reasons that he did that was because in those days, this is going back to the late 50s, homosexuality was still considered a psychiatric illness.
Right.
So a lot of guys couldn't admit to themselves
that they were gay.
That they were gay.
So instead, he got paid for it and it made him feel more relaxed.
It made him feel, well, I'm not really gay, I'm just doing it for the money.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was a way to make him accept his homosexuality, explore his homosexuality. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, for him, an educated guy, he had all this talent in him. He didn't know how to express it. Now he's on Times Square and he's meeting all these fascinating drag queens and Johns and other hustlers and people that are paying.
Midnight Cowboy, really.
It's before Midnight Cowboy. Midnight Cowboy.
Yeah, right.
So he started taking in, through his writer's eye, he started saying, this can be the material that I've been looking for, that I can use to express my smoldering talent. He had a talent in him that he didn't know exactly how to express or what to do with it. The hustling scene gave him the material that he had been looking for.
You know, I came back from Vietnam in the 70s, and I used to hang around Schwab's. And this guy, here is John Ritchie. This guy, can I get a close-up this one? I love this close-up if I can zip this. There it is. Now, he reminds me of the one and only Sylvester Stallone. When I used to go to the Schwab's on Sunset, Sylvester used to be there. And I used to see this man on Selma, hustling, on Selma Avenue in Hollywood.
That was his spot.
On Selma.
And he was a man who
I thought it was Sylvester Stallone doing that, and I found out it wasn't. It was because he reminds me of Sylvester Stallone with the body and looking and Rocky and all that.
Well, I'll tell you, what makes it interesting is that one of the things that John Ritchie learned on the streets was how to perfect that image, that Sylvester Stallone image, that tough, inscrutable, you know, very masculine, untouchable, sex symbol type of person that always sells. That's only one part of who he is. I mean, underneath all that, there's something else. But the Sylvester Stallone himself, an actor, has an image.
Right.
John Ritchie was very much an actor on the streets, and he knew what people wanted to pay for. He perfected that very early on.
He was very recognizable. I used to see him on Santa Monica sometimes without his shirt. He used to parade without, am I right?
He's one of the first guys who, he paraded without a shirt in the days when it was illegal for a guy to go without a shirt.
Yeah, right. That's right.
He brought shirtlessness to Hollywood Boulevard, to Griffith Park is another place where he used to hustle.
Is that where he hustled? In Griffith Park? Really?
He would cruise and hustle in Griffith Park.
I wouldn't think that.
Yeah.
That's a dangerous area to cruise and
Well,
get
more
paid.
so now.
Yeah.
But back then, yeah, Griffith Park, Recchi was addicted to hustling in the same way that he was addicted to being a great writer. And one of the interesting things about him is because as a child, he always felt so inadequate. He felt like a misfit. He felt like an outsider. His father was a very macho Mexican guy who had, he wanted his sons to be athletic.
Right.
He wanted his sons to be very macho. And John wasn't like his older brothers. John was poetic. John was sensitive. John wrote stories and created fantasies in his head. So his father always was making him feel so worthless. So as he grew, it was so important for him to be not only great at what his talent was as to be a great writer, it also became very important to him to be desirable. And I think that's why he became addicted to hustling. He wanted people to pay for him. That reaffirmed that he was a valuable person.
Charles Costello, you've written for the New York Times. You have written for the Los Angeles Times. You are a fine writer.
Thank you.
Also, you've got a book out, a book called The Maryland Diaries about Marilyn Monroe.
Yes.
And how is that book doing right now?
Well, it's doing very well. I don't want to take too much credit for it because the name Marilyn Monroe still fascinates. Her love life still...
It does fascinate a lot of people.
Yes.
Jimmy Dean, James Dean, Marilyn Monroe.
Certain people...
Why not Humphrey Bogart or Mae West?
Well, I
Tell me.
think that a gentle spirit and a certain sensitivity and a certain vulnerability, and also the idea of dying young in your prime.
That's
what fascinates.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because Recchi also had a long-time fascination with Monroe, and he also wrote a book about her. And both of our books are fictitious. Mine's The Marilyn Diaries, which recreates, it's rumored that Marilyn kept a diary in the last few years of her life. My book recreates what might have been in that diary.
Oh, I see.
Had it been discovered all these years later. Recchi wrote a book called Marilyn's Daughter, which is what if she actually had a daughter who survived her with Robert Kennedy. And so we both explored her life in fiction.
How did you connect with him to write this book? How did you connect him?
Well, it's interesting because as a teenager, I read City of Night.
Right.
And
I think every young boy has read City of Night and The Pillar, City in the Pillar
of
Gore Vidal.
Yeah, we find those books somehow, or they find us.
Right.
I immediately related to Recchi. I immediately knew that this was an extraordinary person, a very sensitive person.
Right.
The book City of Night is about a hustler drifting across the country and interacting with a variety of different characters. And it was the first time that you talk about drag queens. And it's the first time that you talk about other hustlers and the people that pay for hustlers and these hidden clubs. And I immediately felt a connection with him, and I wanted to know him. He took on a mythical, faraway quality to me, someone like a James Dean or a Montgomery Clift.
Right.
So when I moved to LA, I was working for a magazine, and they said, do you have any ideas of someone who you'd like to profile? And I said, well, what about Recchi? And they said, well, try to get him, and we'd love to do it.
How did he choose you to write his life story, though, Charles? I mean, you as a writer, This is your first autobiography, isn't it?
It's the first biography that I've written. I think that what happened was I did this article on him for this magazine, and he liked it. And then when I approached him about a book, we connected on a lot of levels. We're both Pisces, number one, which means immediately moody, broody,
Charles,
talented.
wait a minute, back up. I'm looking at you. Are you trying to compare yourself with John Recchi? I mean, you're saying you're very much alike. You are writers.
Yes.
You are also Marilyn Monroe story lovers.
Yes, we both love
So you have a love affair with Mr. John Recchi's life. Am I saying something?
I say that the love affair with his life, I would say that very early on, when you're a creative person, you find certain people who become a muse to you, someone who inspires you. His life, his work inspired me very early on.
As being a prostitute, John, as a young boy from New York City growing up with a Catholic family and everything, looking and reading this book, and he was a male prostitute, let's face it.
But he was also...
Did that really fascinate you?
I think one of the things that fascinated me about me was that it was the first time I saw a book where you can take these really decadent situations and these decadent characters, these seedy characters, and you can change it into poetry. You can change it into drama. You can change it into character, to comedy. I didn't know that you can use all those subject matters to change it into literature, which he did so masterfully in that book. So it was, he made me want to write because I had my own
Well, that's good.
loneliness. I had my own decadence. I had my own fantasies. And Recchi made me realize you can use this and transform it into art.
Numbers. Numbers is a club here in Hollywood.
That's right.
It was on Sunset. I discovered that club when I came back from Vietnam, and it was right, matter of fact, right across the street from Schwab's.
Yes.
During the daytime, people used to go for lunch sometimes. But at night, it was a whorehouse.
They went for dessert.
It was a total whorehouse of male prostitutes.
Yes.
It's incredible.
Well, it moved now. Now it's on Santa Monica
It is.
Boulevard.
And this is where Recchi carried on, picked up Liberace's and stuff like. Tell me about that.
The Liberace incident. Well, one of the interesting anecdotes in the book is that one of the fascinating things about Recchi, which I was mentioning, is that he was so many different characters in one body.
Right.
And part of him was, at this point that he met Liberace, was that he was a literary persona.
Right.
You know, he was a great writer. He was respected. He came out with this book called Numbers. And Liberace read it. And he said, he saw the photo of Recchi on the book, and he said, I want to meet John Recchi. So they had a mutual friend.
I was fascinated. Then the word numbers, right?
Yeah, numbers and the person
Yeah.
who was
Right, connected
counting
with
the
it.
numbers. So a mutual friend of theirs set up a dinner party for Recchi and Liberace to meet. And John always confused his personas. He was at the dinner party. He wanted Liberace to desire him, so he dressed in this exquisite flesh-colored shirt that fit him like a second skin.
Right.
And Liberace was coming on to him and putting his hand on his crotch under the table. And then all of a sudden, when Recchi knew that Liberace desired him, he said, okay, I'm not a hustler anymore. Now I'm a great writer. And he tried to, like, you know, play down his hustler image. And, you know, it was, now am I a writer or am I a hustler? He was always confusing those personas.
He didn't look like a writer. He looked like this. Give me a close-up of this bodies here. Look at this. I mean, that is total hustling body. Look at that.
He used to like to pose for he's so narcissistic that he used to like to pose for remember in the 50s and 60s when they didn't have gay magazines, they had these torso magazines. He used to pose for those.
And who's this lady right here, John?
Well, those are
It's just friends?
friends because he had such a complex relationship with his mother that when his mother died, I think that he was always trying to recreate that relationship with lady friends, creative, talented, beautiful women friends. And those are some of the
He
women.
really loved his body. Give me a close-up of this. Look at this. Look at that. He was very, very much, he looked great. You know that?
And there he is in front of the mirror, one of his favorite objects.
Mirror? Look at it.
He told me once that every day he used to kiss himself in the mirror and say, I love you.
John Recchi teaches, does he teach now?
He teaches a master class.
A master class of writing?
Creative writing, and a lot of famous writers have come out of his class.
Like who?
Michael Cunningham, who won the Pulitzer Prize last year.
Oh, right.
Was one of his students originally. Oh, are you ringing?
No, I don't think the phone is ringing, but go ahead.
Pick it up, darling.
Go
Let's
ahead,
see who it is.
darling.
Maybe it's Recchi.
We're just on the, doing a TV show. Bye. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, a lot of famous novelists, a lot of famous writers come. And you know what? You know an interesting thing about his students? They're not gay students. They're not hustler students. Male, straight businessmen who want to write. Housewives who have a yearning to write. They relate to something in his body of work. Skippy,
ahead.
you're such a popular guy.
Yeah, go ahead. This phone, just stop calling, please. Okay, go ahead.
The people in his classes found him because they connected to, I think, the sensitivity in his writing, the spirit in his writing, the liveliness. I mean, he's definitely a master writer. A thing about his writing is that if you take any of the great Recchi books, if you take City of Night,
Gord Vidal loved that book.
Yes.
Gord Vidal loved that. And he also loved your book.
He did.
He really
I'm very proud
you
to
got
say
some great reviews.
Gore Vidal gave me a quote for the cover, and that was the highlight of my life.
What was the cover?
Gore Vidal says, Charles Costello has written a most original biography of what in retrospect now seems to be one of the few original American writers of the last century.
And it makes you feel good. Of course, that's wonderful.
When I saw the letter that he hand wrote to my publishers, to see my name, Charles Costello, written in the handwriting of Gore Vidal was one of the
You've never
highlights
met
of
him?
my life. No, he lives in Italy now.
I met him in Rome.
What's he like?
Oh, he's a great guy.
Yeah?
Very bright and very witty and very definite. He's really definite. The story of a young gay hustler. That really shocked the world.
It
then.
did.
It did shock it, didn't it?
Well, had no American writer had the guts to write very openly about hustling and drag queens.
Uh-huh.
And you know, in those days, as you might remember, the bars could be raided at any given moment. They were shadowy places and on street corners that no one knew about. To wear makeup for a man, you would be arrested. So
That
no one knew about this.
Absolutely, I know that.
I mean, Genet wrote about it in Europe, but no one in America. I mean, Capote and Gorbadal were writing very veiled, shadowy references to homosexuality. Recchi was the first who came out and said, this is a lifestyle. This is what we're calling an underground, but it exists.
Were you ever a hustler? You're a good-looking guy. Were you ever a hustler? No, come. I'm just asking you.
I think that we all have a little bit of a hustler in us.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be sexual.
Uh-huh.
I think that if someone desires you, that is a power, and we could either choose to abuse that power, or we can use it as a weapon. And I choose that if someone does desire me, I'm very flattered, and I try to use it in a way that can benefit both of us. But I never would use it as a weapon. I would never use it to hurt someone or to take advantage of someone.
What have Charles Costello learned about John Ritchie?
Well, I learned that he's one of these extraordinary people in life that only come along every 50 or 100 years. He's a remarkable person who extraordinary things happen to, but also not only, you know, that happens to people. Some people just have remarkable lives, but he has the artist's eye so that he's able to take these situations, bring them in, and then channel them out into his fiction, which makes him the writer and the creator of a remarkable body of work that will last for centuries. People will be reading Ritchie for generations to come.
Did he have a good childhood?
No.
A happy childhood? No?
No. I say in the book, one of my lines in the book is that loneliness is one of the great motivators.
Right. Montgomery Clift had that.
Yeah, I mean, he was very lonely. He was an outcast. He was a misfit. He wasn't accepted. His father made him feel insecure. And
Jamie Dean had the same quality. They all did.
I think that what that does, although it's excruciating while it's going on and it robs you of a childhood, which is a time when we should all be carefree and having fun,
right.
What it does is it plants in you seeds that make you want to be great, that want to make you leave a mark on the world, that want to make you create work that makes people take notice of you because you're not noticed as a child.
Right.
So you're sort of waving your arm saying, look at me, I'm a worthwhile person too. So if anything else that comes of it, it does plant in you an incredible fire, an incredible ambition.
Tell me about Selma. Was he on Selma Street? How many hours did he spend waiting for a trick to come up? Did he ever tell you about that?
He told me that he spent countless hours there, and there were nights when he was very much in demand, and there were nights when no one would pick him up.
That's it.
Well, there were, you know, don't forget, he hustled up until the time he was 50 years old.
50, I've seen him. That's when I saw him.
When you saw him, you know, a 50-year-old, almost like a Jack LaLanne type, very buff
very
and
much
muscular
so.
and oiled up. And people would want that because he played, you know, at the time there was a lot of androgynous drag queen types. And
how did he feel standing on the corner hustling at 50 years old? Did he ever tell you?
It was an addiction, and he was, a lot of times panic would set in. Is someone going to want me tonight? Is someone not going to want me tonight? And then he would go home after being desired, and he would go home alone. But he was terrified of a relationship. He was terrified of connecting with one person and giving up, a narcissist.
Yes.
What if I start a relationship with somebody and they ultimately reject me? I think that was one of his big fears. And I think that was one of the reasons that he never had a relationship up until the time he was in his late 40s, early 50s.
Does he have a relationship now still?
He's been in a relationship for over 20 years with a wonderful guy, a very patient guy who was able to put up with his...
What do you mean by patient, John? You're saying, Charles, what is...
I think that to
Is he tough to live with?
I think that he was a tough person to get involved with and to know because he was narcissistic and because he did have all these... he came with a tremendous amount of baggage. You know, he wanted to be the most desirable one. If you're going to go out with somebody who's 22 and you're 52, the 22-year-old might sometimes be the more desirable one.
Right.
So it becomes a contest. Who's more desirable? Should I call you or will you call me? Well, if I call you, that means that I like you more than I do. I think that all those things came into play in the relationship and made it only for a very patient person to be able to put up with that for the first few years before they became on solid ground.
Is he happy what you did with the book?
I think he's happy with a lot of it. One of our agreements from the very beginning was that he would not tamper with, he would tell me his story, he would give me He wrote to his friends and said, I have a biographer, be very honest with them, don't hold back. And I said, John, if I'm going to write this book, you can't, in the end, say, you can't put this in, or I don't agree with what you're saying
Right.
here. You've got to give me full control. And in all fairness to him, he did do that. He let me write what I wanted to. He let me come up with my own conclusions. I think there's things in the books that he would write. It's not a Valentine.
Right.
I think there's things in the books that he would rather me have not put. But in the end, I think we respect each other, and I think he respects the books and my opinions.
Is he afraid growing old?
Aren't we all?
Yeah, it's true, but is he?
I think that
He.
because he was so desirable and so beautiful in his youth, that it's harder when a lot of your early years were based on being attractive and being desirable. I think it's harder to grow older. So I think that it is hard for him to grow older, but he has maintained his body. He still has a great body, and I think the fact that he is in a loving relationship helps. And the fact that he has a great career and he's a respected writer
Right.
also makes it easier to become older, because you don't have to rely so much on your physical anymore.
Looking back when you were interviewing him, did he ever tell you, did you ever ask him, would you've done it, do it again, or you're sorry you've done it, or did you ask him? How
I did ask him that.
You did?
He
What
said
did-
that he would absolutely do everything exactly the way that he did, and I asked him if he could be preserved forever at 30, would he still be hustling? And he said yes. And I said, even though you're in a committed relationship and you have this great career as a writer and you're a respected teacher, you'd still be hustling? He said, look, I like certain kinds of foods. I like French food, and that's one type of meal that I
Right.
like. I like Italian food. I like American food. I like the whole range of experiences. Hustling was a very fulfilling part of my life, and if I could still be doing it, I would still be doing it.
Did you ask him, John Ritchie? It's 2003. Now, the AIDS came in when you just gave it up. AIDS, he didn't have to worry about that.
Well, he did, because he was hustling in the 70s when AIDS was
just started.
starting.
Just
but,
started.
I think what protected him is that he was very limited as what he would do sexually.
Oh.
He wouldn't reciprocate. I mean, he was one from the old school of the 50s, of the real macho guy who just kind of like laid back
Be
and let
butch,
whatever
be
happened,
butch.
be butch.
Yeah.
And I think that protected him to a certain degree of getting diseases.
I see. You know, he looks like, I'm looking at a picture here, he just looked like an ordinary young man next door. Look at this right
That's
here.
his lover. That's actually his
oh,
lover.
is this lover?
That's his lover. That's
Oh.
the guy that
Oh, really?
he met when he was in
And
his
but
20s.
that looks like Tom Sawyer. Cute kid.
He calls
that,
him-
Does he
yeah.
call him Tom Sawyer?
He said that he was like a cross between an angel and Tom Sawyer.
Angel and Tom Sawyer. Is
He's
this
actually
his,
a big producer now.
is this his family?
Yes.
This right here? This
Yeah.
is this.
He
Right
came
here.
from
Can
a
I-
very loving family, except his father, who always made him feel very inadequate.
That's his father there and mother.
Yes.
How many brothers? He has two
He
brothers?
has 2 older brothers
Uh-huh.
and 2 older sisters.
I see.
He had another sister who died when she was a child.
It reminds me of Sylvester Stallone.
They
when
have
I
that
first
macho
came-
image, you know,
Huh? It's
that sexuality
Macho,
and that-
yeah. That's the 70s look. That's
Yeah.
the Rocky look. He had that Rocky
They
look.
say that Al Pacino based his look in the movie Cruising on John Ritchie.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
And how does he feel about that?
Well,
Does he-
you know, his image was, when Gus Van Sant made the movie My Own Private Idaho, he made
Right.
Keanu Reeves and River Phoenix read City of Night to get a feel
Uh-huh.
of what a real hustler was like. So he's used to his image coming into popular culture. The Doors wrote a song where the refrain was City of Night, City of Night, City of Night.
Right.
David Bowie used a lot of his material in his songs and in his work. So he's used his life being used in popular culture.
Charles Costello, how long did it take you to write this book? Because it's an interesting book. Not just only interesting, but I couldn't put it down.
Well, that
I mean,
makes me
from
feel
page
good.
to
We
page.
like that.
Pardon me. I mean, I knew a lot about this, but my audience doesn't.
Yes.
See, in my audience, when they read this, they're gonna be shocked. You know, that a guy in America, they do this. They do it in
Yes.
Europe. They do it all over the world.
It's the oldest profession, isn't it?
To
But
be a male whore or
well,
a
or a
woman
woman
whore,
whore,
any
but men
whores.
do it
I
too,
mean,
and that's,
I
I
like
think-
the title. Who came up with the title, The Outlaw?
Outlaw. Well, my original title was Body of Work,
I like that too.
but the publishers liked Outlaw
Now,
because
who published this?
it's Advocate Books,
Uh-huh. And they're connected with
Allison Publications.
Allison's, yeah, right. It's doing very well. It's
Just came out, but it's selling out of bookstores and it's getting lots of publicity. It was a hot pick in Vanity Fair this month.
Uh-huh.
the month of December, and just getting lots of publicity because it's such a fascinating life. He's got such a compelling body of work, and
Who would you like to see? This is going to be a movie, definitely a movie.
I
Who
hope
would
so.
you like to see this being done by?
I thought about that a lot, and my mind keeps coming back to Johnny Depp.
Great, great.
Because I think that he can play, you need someone who can play a variety of ages from young to old. And
Right.
I think Johnny Depp could play a 23-year-old and he could play a 50-year-old.
Uh-huh.
And also he has the guts to play that kind of a character, and he has the range as an actor to play it.
Uh-huh. Talk more about some of Ritchie's books. He's done so many of them.
Yes, and that's one of the makes him a great writer, is the fact that he never repeated City of Night. He could have made a successful career of writing City of Night over and over again, the tales of a male whore. But he always experimented with style. He always experimented with structure. I mean, he's written in the voice of Marilyn Monroe. He's written in the voice of a maid in Bel Air.
Uh-huh.
He's written about lawyers. He's written about a whole range. If you take any of the great Ritchie books and read them side by side, like City of Night and The Miraculous Day of Amalia Gomez, you would know that you're reading a great writer, but you may not know it was the same author. He never repeats himself. He's always experimenting.
I'm looking, Charles Costello. I don't have you asked some of your favorite writers. Who are they? Authors.
Well,
Evidently, Ritchie is right there.
Ritchie, I consider him a teacher, a muse. Before I met him, he was a friend. He was a master. He was someone who spoke to me as a teenager and gave me direction in my life. So he definitely had a big influence on the direction of my life. Of course, I love Truman Capote. I mean, the rhythm of his writing
Right.
always stays with me. Gore Vidal, today I like the modern day writers. I like this woman named Mary Gateskill,
Uh-huh.
who writes about the underbelly
Uh-huh.
of society. I take a little bit from everybody. Poetry, I love Sylvia Plath.
You grew up in New York City.
Yes.
And growing up in New York, always wanted to be a writer? But
Something creative as a Pisces. I mean,
Uh-huh.
people thought I'd be a painter. People thought I'd be an actor. My life's road pointed me in the direction of being a writer.
it's a good book, The Outlaw, by John Ritchie, by Charles Costello. It's been very nice talking to you today.
And my pleasure.
Enjoyed it. I love this book.